So this is the third day of this Deconstructing the World of Self retreat. By tomorrow at this time, we will be almost at the end of our retreat. So please, time is precious. Time on retreat is precious. Time to, in a single-minded and concentrated way, without other responsibilities, to focus on one's own inner development, so to speak. This is a rare opportunity. Please don't waste it by frittering away today, thinking about this or that, the future, all that stuff. Okay? The future will be here when it arrives. And then you'll have plenty of opportunity to be with it. Any future you think about now is purely imaginary future. Right? So please understand that and don't waste your time frittering around in the world of imagination. So we spent the last we began here when? Thursday, Friday, Sunday. Today's Sunday. So we've been at it now for about 2.5 days. Through meditation, through the talks, through a lot of interaction and discussion with people, we've really tried to, in a very practical way, just get a sense of, the self and how it is functioning in our life. And I believe for many people, it's been quite a kind of an awakening. Because we usually think of self in kind of a strong way, it's kind of when self is out and we're having an afflictive emotion or we're stuck or we're fixated, then we kind of think, oh, that's myself again, But I think you've come to realize that self is an omnipresent event. That from the moment we wake up in the morning, to the time we go to bed at night, and even in our dreams, we experience ourself as a self. And that all the thoughts that we have are somehow related to the sense of I, me, mine. And that, as we said yesterday, this self, in order to preserve itself and advance itself, is continually at war with reality. Quite simply, with what is. Sometimes open warfare breaks out. That's times of great afflictive emotion and acting out. But most of the time, it's just an ongoing massaging of events and situations in which self is always comes out on top. Self is always right. Self is always correct. Self is always getting its needs met. You see? So that endless activity, again, which is constant, even at a subliminal basis, is self. And so again, we've kind of spent now 2.5 days, so it's not just theoretical, so you really within your own mind and experience get a sense of what's going on. And we've begun to look at kind of its creation, how it's not just a constant thing, but it's related to lots of other things, such as our past, our childhood, or, all kinds of stuff. Our culture, it is an ongoing event as opposed to a single discrete thing. Now, before we kind of begin today to really kind of look more deeply into, really what this self is or isn't, is anything that has been shared, meditated on up to now, is anything not clear, anything you have questions about, please feel free to ask a question if you have any. Again, I realize there's been lots of opportunity in the last couple of days to do that. But is anything not clear? I mean, do you see yourself as we're talking clearly now? Or more clearly? Or even somewhat clearly? That's all good, you see, because it's important, because we are always experiencing the effects of self, right? But we sort of never really have seen the culprit, Sort of like coming out into your kitchen and you see somebody's been eating this, what do you call it? You haven't seen the mouse yet, but you see its traces. It's like that. You kind of, we're always seeing the traces of self, but we, because of the nature of self, the delusive nature of self, we always think the cause of our problems are what? Not ourselves, are outside us. Other people, other situations, life, that's what we think is the cause. And we don't see it is the very experience of being a self and how the self operates in the world and in our consciousness. That is the cause of all our problems. But because, again, we are so identified with it, it is so all-pervasive in our experience, we cannot see it. It is only through mindfulness, right? It is only through the teachings that we first have an opportunity to look in the right direction, to see what's really going on. And again, why do we want to do that? Because we want to be free of suffering. I mean, all the teachings and all the practices are serving one, and we want to be free of suffering. We want to be happy. We want to fulfill our potential of what it means to be a human being. And we have a sense that something is short-circuiting us. Something's not right? And we don't know what it is. But again, because we think the problem is outside ourselves, we're always endlessly trying to fix the external situation, people, or else we're trying to fix ourself. Even when we get a glimmer that somehow myself, we're just trying to kind of shape it up, right? You see, we go into therapy, we go into the self-improvement stuff. Why? Because we know self is a little, not going about things right. So, if I could just kind of modulate it a bit, improve it a bit, right? Then everything will be okay, right? But eventually that doesn't work. I mean, it works to make certain things better, but underneath there's still this sense something's missing, something's not right. It's like a nagging kind of unconscious subliminal thing that's always kind of creating an underlying kind of, we're not at ease in life. We're not at ease in relationships. We're not at ease deep down inside. We're not at ease, as we pointed out last night, even in our meditation, we're not at ease. Right? But we never kind of look at that. We deny that, or we, go outside. So today we want to go inside and see what the great teachers and masters and Buddha discovered about this self. So again, are we all on the same page? Just nod if we are. If you're not on the same page, just shake your head no, and we'll ask you why. Everybody on the same page? Just checking. Good. So, and there are many ways of approaching this, and we'll kind of in next hour see if we can put it all together in some way. So there is a kind of an obvious human development way of looking at this, right? We are born, And as a child, we have a very, we have no language. There's no linguistics at all, right? And so we have a very prime mind, right? An uncluttered mind. A mind that's really not aware of self and other at all, and can't really name anything. And it just responds to the world in a very prime way, right? But already the seeds are there. When it's, we could basically say, it doesn't want to suffer, and it wants to feel good, right? I mean, it's kind of a basic, if you ever been around infants, that's kind of what they're about, right? When they're wet and cold, they cry, right? When they get a dry diaper, or somebody puts a blanket on them, they stop crying. They're happy. When they're alone, they cry. When somebody comes and picks them up, they're happy. When they're hungry, they cry. When they get food, they're happy, right? So it's but already you can see there's a mechanism going on here in the human infant already, right? There's a moving toward and an aversion to. It's called crying and smiling. And the wonderful thing about children is that sort of, there aren't a lot of things in between, right? They're either happy or unhappy. And most children, unless they have, other kinds of things or things have happened to them, are basically happy, unless there's some kind of physical thing, you know what I mean, or something else. They're basically happy, especially if all their needs are being met. Is that true? Right, so it's a kind of, right? So we can see this is a very basic mind that's primarily aware and present, but also because that mind is functioning in tangent with a body, and because the body is experiencing pleasure and pain, that the mind is also sort of involved in that, and the emotions are sort of involved in that. So already we can see the mind is getting a little conditioned. Now, as human beings, you see, we enter the world through our five senses. How do we know the world? We see, we hear, we smell, we taste, and we feel. Right? So the child is entering the world through its senses. It's having lots of sensory experiences. But they're very pure and immediate and direct. Right? They just are. I don't know if any of you can remember being 1 year old, but it's sort of like that. There's really nothing going on inside. They're just present to experience. Again, that is why they are a delight to be around. I mean, when they're not crying, or when they're not, suffering, so to speak. But then, there is this development. We might call it brain development, mind development, right? Where, the baby begins to understand about objects, right? And we put things around in the baby's crib so they'll see objects, right? And we want them to move toward objects. And all of a sudden they begin with their senses, including their mouth, hands, they begin to explore the world of objects, right? They see things. And they crawl toward them. And we get all excited, right? They're moving toward objects. They're picking objects up, right? They're exploring the world of things. Okay? So you see, our consciousness is beginning to enter the world and interact with the world. And then as time goes on, there is somebody there, usually the parent, who is giving the child what? Labels and names for all the things that it is touching and tasting. This is this is that, right? So the world is now beginning to have names, right? Labels. as well as a very primary label. Primary labels are being given to the child's experience, such as what? You're Kevin. That's your name. You are Kevin. Me, Daddy. You see? Daddy. And we get all excited when Kevin goes, Kev. He said, Kev. We get all excited. Or he says, Daddy. We get, you say, we think it's wonderful. But it's kind of, it's a slippery slope. You see? So not only is it maybe just tighten it. I'm going to do it with my hand, I guess. No problem. I'll try again. Right? So again, there is the labeling of the world, but there is the labeling of this. Okay? And over time, a fundamental shifts occurs. Right? Is that a fundamental shift occurs? Is that this kind of undefined, undiscriminating conscious awareness of the child is now being broken up. And the world of discrimination has begun, which in and of itself may not be a bad thing. Okay? It just is what it is. But the fundamental split, the fundamental ignorance that begins to develop is that the child begins to think that I am here and these are my things. Right? The child begins to extend, it sees all these things, you see, out there that look like discrete objects. It kind of sees people, including itself in the mirror, right, that all appear as discrete objects. And it begins to think, oh, I am me, these are my things, and that's all a bunch of yous. You see, the world of separation and duality begins to unfold. Because even though that was not the natural experience of the child psychologists have well said that the child has a great sense of universality in its mind. It doesn't discriminate. It actually feels that it and the mother are the same, right? But the separation begins to develop. Is that clear? And that's from that fundamental split, right, where the self begins to, because it appears that way and it kind of feels like this, something that kind of owns all this, you see, who's having these experiences, who's hungry. It's my daddy, my mom, you know what I mean? It just begins to, in a not too radical way, begin to develop. Okay. And what happens, of course, well, again, but it's more than just objects. Things are happening, right? That's called childhood, right? And your parents, and the kind of parents, and the way you're treated, and the way you're looked at, and whether you're picked up right away or you're not picked up right away, or, whether they look at you with the eyes of love, or they look at you with the eyes of indifferent, or they look at you with the eyes of anger, or, you know what I mean? All that kind of stuff unfolds too. And that's all incorporated in our sense of self. You see, it's growing. right? And they're just ways our family does things and doesn't do things, and our extended family does things or doesn't, and how we relate, and this is all now being incorporated, and the kids in the neighborhood, and the places we go to, and the school, and they're all being incorporated. Go to church, it's all being incorporated into what? Into my sense of who I am. And it just goes on from there. And over the years, it gets what we call reified, which means it has more of a sense like a building. It seems to be a discrete thing. This is me, and you're you. Everybody know what I'm talking about? But that is not true. As the Buddha said, it is a constructed house. The self is a constructed house. It's made up of things. In his great enlightenment, he said, the house is destroyed. Right? It's like if these walls were torn down, we'd go, oh, I'm really outside. See, I always thought I was inside. You see? I'm in here, and the outside is out there. Right? But if the walls were totally blown down, we would go what? There's no inside or outside. All this time I thought I was inside, I was really outside. And the outside was really inside. These were just fabricated walls. I don't know what's going on there. I mean, it's like, I think I'm just doing what I usually do. Take it off and type. Sure. Is that clear? I mean, that's one way of looking at it. You see, and we have forgotten our original home. What was our original home? Just being aware, just being present, and experiencing things directly, without any separation. Is that clear? That's our home. Right? And what we've turned our home into, our natural home, is this constructed self. Now, this constructed self doesn't exist in any real way. It only exists as all these parts, all these pieces, all these thoughts, all these feelings, all these memories, all these stories, right? So self has no real existence. How does it prove that it exists? Well, that's one of the ways. Yeah, it doesn't exist in any real way. So it always has to work. It always has to grab at things to prove that it's real. Right? That is why it is so hard for people to be alone. Because when they're alone, self has nothing to amuse it. Self has nothing to do. Right? That is why even when you meditate, self is still manufacturing dramas. Things for you to worry about, to think about, to judge about, to get mad at, right? Because that's the only way it exists. It exists only as thoughts. What kind of thoughts? I, me, mine thoughts. That's how it exists. People who are in the deconstruction intensive, we had exercises, the I, me, mine exercises. People watch how often I, me, mine just permeates our speech. Right? And then there were exercises like, what happens when you say flower and what happens when you say my flower? What changes? right? Poor Kevin, he's sitting in front of me. What happens when somebody says, I don't really like Kevin? You go, well, it's okay. You know what I mean? Or, well, But what happens when somebody says, I don't like you, meaning me? Now that's another, right? That's another kettle of fish, right? You see? Right? As soon as we attach I, me, mine to anything, it's now about self. And if there's one thing that self is attached to, grasping to, it's its identities, that it is fabricated out of all the material of life. Remember I said yesterday, it's like picking up all the pieces of tiles that are around you and putting together and thinking, that's your realm of choice. That's your mosaic, without even realizing there are infinite possibilities. But we just, so the self is made up of all these parts from our past, but that we think is a thing. It's me, right? My table, my flowers, my thermos. You see? If it's Lindsay's thermos over by her, I don't care about it. But when it's my thermos, I do. Right? You see, if somebody drinks out of Lindsay's thermos, it's like, okay. But if somebody drinks out of my thermos, it's, oh no. Why not? Because this is me. Right? Until I get sick of it and buy a new one. Then I throw it out. And I couldn't care what happens to it. Right? But while it's mine, don't you mess with it. Right? And that's all our stuff. That's our bodies. That's, right? At the end, we're going to die, and we're going to, this body's going to either be burnt or buried, or, you know what I mean? That's all. It's like this body that we care so much and put so much energy into. One day we're going to leave it. Right? We buy a house and we fix it up and blah, 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 blah. Cares. We love it when people come over and they go, "Oh, what a nice house you have." Why? Why? Because it's my house. It's me. Don't you understand? And I like, from like childhood, I like pleasure. So when somebody says, "You got a really nice house here. You guys did a great job." Pleasure. Right? If somebody tells me, I would have done it differently, or somebody doesn't say anything, it's like, what? Aversion, affliction. Right? Alienation, sense of separation, disconnection, existential angst. It's all from self. And it's not the big stuff, the day-to-day. It's like underneath the whole thing. It's like, why is it never right? Right? I've worked so hard to get it right. To get all the things you're supposed to get and have all the experiences you're supposed to have, right? And still, it's not enough. Right? I need more, right? As Maria said, right? I need another vacation. How many, if I ask Maria, I have no idea. How many nice vacations have you had in your life? It's that many. I mean, it's more than 2 or 3, right? It's more than 2 or 3. You've had a lot. Oh yeah, yeah. And yet it's interesting. We still have this craving for another one. You see, we never ask ourselves, where does that come from? I mean, when does it end? When you die. See, that's what the Buddha saw. That's why he did what he did. He goes, wow, this thing it's never ending. It's all impermanent. Every happiness is impermanent. Everything's, all the people in my life, all the things, it's all, when you add it all up, it ultimately doesn't do anything, right? Because I need another what? Yeah, or instead of vacation, we could just put in anything. I need another job. I need another relationship. I need another movie. I need another cookbook. I need another, you know what I mean? It's like, I'm always needing something, right? I may have 25 cookbooks. I go into people's houses, people have shelves of cookbooks, which is fine. I'm happy, but it's like, how many cookbooks do you need? It's, and there'll be 25 cookbooks on the shelf, and you know what they'll be talking about? The latest cookbook. Got to get it. What was wrong with all the dishes? There are probably about 10,000 dishes in the other cook, right? That we could make for dinner tonight. But it's kind of funny, but we never go, what's underneath that? Why? More Buddhist books. More Buddhist books, right? Haven't integrated the ones I already get, and already get more Buddhist books. More books about Buddhism. More books about self-improvement. More books about diet. More books about food. More books, right? Endless. And we never ask ourselves, what's it all about? What is the source of this craving? The function of self is to grasp. Whenever you're grasping, desiring, attaching, you are in the world of self. Very simple. That's what self does. It has no life outside of grasping and aversion. What else is it going to do? Because it doesn't exist in any way other than through this kind of attachment, aversion kind of activity. Okay. So that's kind of one model. Okay. A more classical model, that's kind of my little model of, kind of human psychology development with kind of Buddhism. But the more traditional model in Mahayana Buddhism is the model that came out of what's called Yogacara Buddhism, which Zen, the Dzogchen, all the really developed teachings of awakening are based on, right? Those of you familiar with Thich Nhat Hanh, his book, it's not called Transformation of the Base, it's called Understanding Our Mind, Vasubandhu, that's Yogacara. Okay, so that's what Thai studied as a monastic. Yogacara, which many people consider the high point of Buddhist understanding of the mind, Buddhist psychology, posits 8. So this is another kind of model helping us understand this sense of self that we believe is real and existent, is a thing. See, it's not that that things don't appear this way. It's not as if there doesn't appear to be somebody here or something here, that when we say, I'm hungry, or, you know what I mean, or I'd like this, or, I prefer that. There seems to be something here saying that, right? But most people think that's me who's saying it. Like I'm a thing. I'm a discrete entity. I'm a Fred, right? That's who's saying it. That's who's wanting that. That's who's needing that. That's who's achieving that. That's whose story it is. It's Fred's story, right? And everybody else has theirs. So that's the way it appears. But the third aspect of Buddhist meditation after mindfulness and concentration is insight. As Thich Nhat Hanh says, looking deeply. We need to look deeply. Are things as they appear the way things are? Right? That's the deeper practice. So people who only practice mindfulness and concentration do not wake up, do not become enlightened, do not get liberated. They get many benefits, but it's only through insight into the nature of reality that true wisdom comes. Right? Such as, you see in the Heart Sutra. Form is emptiness. Emptiness is form. Form is not other than emptiness. Emptiness, it appears that myself and my body, it's a form, right? And yet the Buddha says, no, that's not true. It's empty. Empty of what? Empty of any self-existing thing called a self. Okay. So, in Yogacara, they posit that a human mind is made up of 8 consciousnesses. Is this working? Okay. So this is another model that helps us understand what's going on. Okay. You can work it from the 8th to the 1st, or you can work it. All right, we'll work it from the top down, so to speak. Even though, again, they're not discrete entities. It's all one mind, okay? So, there are 5 consciousnesses: eye consciousness, nose consciousness, ear consciousness, mouth consciousness, and sense consciousness, right? Is that clear? This is one kind of consciousness through which, as I said earlier, we know the world. We relate to the world. We interact with the world. We see it, we hear it, we smell it, we taste it, and we feel it. Right? Okay. I mean, that's sort of obvious, right? Now, the next consciousness is called mind consciousness. This is the thinking, discriminating, analyzing, right? Now, it is this mind consciousness that actually is sort of the seat of the other 5, right? The other 5 kind of don't have any relationship to each other, right? The eyes aren't aware of hearing. The nose is not aware of tasting. There's sort of 5 discrete consciousnesses. But the mind, if this is now the thinking mind, they're all seated in that. So the mind is aware of these other 5, right? So the mind has that capacity of being the seat of the other 5, but it also has its own consciousness, which is about thinking, cognition, analyzing, right? These are these qualities, okay? So the information, the data is coming in from the senses, but the thinking mind is thinking about it, turning these direct sensory experiences into kind of symbolic representations, which we call words. Right? We are, another name for the manas, we could say is Manovijnana is discriminating mind. It discriminates our experiences. Okay? Right. But, you see, it's not a free agent. It's not a free agent at all. Because the thinking mind on which the 5 consciousness is resting on the 7th consciousness. Okay? Which is called the Manovijnana. This is the seat of self. Okay? Right? Now the Manovijnana is Ty calls it the lover. I think he calls it the lover or something. He calls it it's in love with itself. this is kind of complicated. I'm just giving you, if you're interested, please study the Yogacara. It's really cool. And actually, I recommend in the second half of the Deconstructing the Myth intensive that's starting, we're going to be studying the Yogacara, these 8 levels, in our deconstruction. This is just like a brief intro. So the cognitive consciousness, the thinking, analyzing, is not acting purely because it is connected to this self, right? That sees everything in terms of itself. It's in love with itself. So all the information that's coming in through our senses and that we are thinking about, right? Our thinking is distorted. What's it distorted by? I, me, mine. Right? Because the seat of the thinking consciousness is in the manovijnana, is in this self-consciousness. And it is perfuming, contaminating all our cognitive perceptions by itself. So we think we're seeing, thinking clearly. It's all distorted. That's called delusion. And we don't even know it. Now, there's another very interesting thing at the 8th level of consciousness, right? And this is the big one. You see, this is like those first 6 are called the upper levels of the mind. You see. Now, the manovijnana, this 7th level of self-consciousness, it actually came out of, this is a formulation, the 8th level of consciousness, which is called the storehouse consciousness. Okay, the storehouse consciousness is really the kind of basis of everything. In it are all the wholesome, all the unwholesome, and the impressions or the residues of all our experience. Our thoughts, our feelings, our perceptions have left residue impressions, or as it said in the Yogacara, seeds. So the storehouse stores, it is a storehouse, but it stores all the seeds of all our experience, wholesome and unwholesome. Storehouse is a storehouse. It doesn't care what's being stored there. It'll store wholesome, it'll store unwholesome. Okay? It just stores everything. But in the storehouse consciousness, these seeds are active. They're not just dead. They're active. They're alive. They're influencing each other. They're perfuming each other. They're interacting with each other, as well as what? In the upper levels, right? Remember the upper levels? Seeing, smelling, tasting, you know what I mean, and thinking. That's going on when? All the time. So we're constantly sending new impressions down there, right? And you know what? Our storehouse consciousness is constantly 24 hours a day sending stuff up, right? That's why, even at night, trying to get a good night's sleep, you have all these dreams. It's all coming from the alaya, okay? Now, remember the 7th level of consciousness. See? Now, even though, I hope I'm not distorting things. So even though the upper levels of consciousness, including the thinking consciousness, are kind of, the 5 senses are based in the thinking consciousness, and the thinking discriminating consciousness is based in the self-consciousness, Okay. What that self-consciousness is primarily looking at and taking as itself is the alaya vijnana. Right? You see. All that stuff is me. Right? So you wonder why you still identify 30 years later with stuff that happened 30 years ago, an old feeling. It's because the self thinks that's who it, what it identifies as itself. And this endless process of things coming in the here and now, and things coming up from the past, from the Alaya, is all filtering. There's a filter in the middle that everything is passing through. What is that? The seventh level of consciousness, the self-consciousness. That's why, unless you practice, you can't get out of it. Right? See, we think we have this twofold delusion. There's a me here, and there's a world out there. Right? Well, Yogacara says that's not true. It's all mind consciousness. All we're endless doing is projecting out onto the world. We never see it clearly. Right? I mean, even to call that a tree is already a distortion. That's just a word. Right? And every characteristic that we somehow could apply to that tree or to that person is all coming from where? Being projected by our mind. So when you say, well, God, I watch my mind and I have all these judgments and evaluations, and yeah, that's what's going on. We're not seeing anything purely as it is. We're seeing these endless distortions that are caused by self. Now, again, that's a thumbnail. I certainly encourage you, but this is Buddhist psychology, very profound, right? And self is always grasping and looking for affirmation and reaffirmation of itself. Right? Somebody asks you to do something, what do you say? Well, let me think about it. You don't have to think about it. Which means what? Got to give myself time to chew on it. And then self will give me the answer. Right? I'm not sure, I'm not sure if I'm comfortable doing that. And this is how we talk, right? I'm not sure that's... What's not comfortable? Are your eyes not comfortable? Are your ears not? You know what I mean? What's not comfortable? Well, the discomfort in my mind. Well, what is that? That's uncomfortable. That's outside my comfort zone. We talk like that. What is this? Who is this I that has a comfort zone? Just conditioning. Yeah.
Sometimes when I'm presented with a position or something I have to decide on, it works for me to just not think about it for a while and let my gut kind of give me the feeling that, this is the choice that feels right.
Yeah, and that kind of yeah. So the question is, but what about, sometimes when I'm faced with making a decision or a choice, rather than thinking about it, I just don't think and just kind of feel my way through, and then a decision comes up. And I would say, yeah, that's good, but please understand that that decision, which seems to be coming from, quote, inside, is conditioned. Okay? There's no way out of it. See,
Even though I try to apply,
yeah. So again, there's a lot here. A big part of Yogacara is wholesome and unwholesome. Okay. And so obviously there is a transformative quality to our practice, which is, cultivating the wholesome and not cultivating the unwholesome. Okay. When you do that, that affects our alaya, our storehouse consciousness. It changes it because there is this quality called perfuming. It's sort of like, I'll give you an extreme example. Anybody ever here been in love? Like puppy love. You remember that? You remember that? Okay. Look how you start smiling. Right. Now, right, you're blushing. So I would say to you, when you were in it, it wasn't just it, and the person. Everything was wonderful, right? I mean, you loved everybody, and everything was easy, and life was good. Can you see? Now, if you think about what's actually happening, because when you fell out of love, all that old stuff came back, But you see, what happened was the very power of that positive experience perfumed your alaya, and all of a sudden, all that other stuff, like all it like attracted all the wholesome. I mean, I feel a little, I'm sort of demystic.
I get that meaning of perfume.
Yeah, yeah. So that's it. But I mean, it goes on all the time. Uh, you know, we create our days. If we wake up and we're a little or this or that or stress, you know what I mean? The day will go a certain way. On the other hand, if we wake up, we're happy. The day will go another way. And it'll attract things. It'll make things differently, right? Why is that? Then Alex, take drugs. If that's the answer, take drugs. You can take all those things. If you think endogenous drugs or taking drugs will actually create a happy person, then you go that way. That's called addiction, right?
I'm not saying
Right.
externally. I'm saying your body has the wisdom to produce those drugs, which make you feel.
And how do you think your body got that wisdom? If you study the Yogacara, you will learn that actually what they say is that the storehouse consciousness is embedded in the body. It's very interesting. I mean, it's quite profound. It actually says all these things that are going on in our body and the amount of these things and that are because it is the alaya. I mean, now we're getting off, right? But it is the alaya. At death, the upper 7 levels separate from the alaya, and it is the alaya that continues on, right? And it is the alaya that then enters, semen, egg, conception. It enters and actually gets incorporated into the body. So that is why it is said that very much the way our body functions and the way it is created by mind, right? But, that's a leap for the scientist because it's, the scientist only sees what it can measure, right? And this is something different. But, again, to even know that, like you said, what does that do for you? To know that it's produced by hormones. Does that sabotage your understanding that I have to transform the nature of my mind? Yeah. Right. Right. It gives you an explanation that because of who you are and your causes and conditions in yourself allow you to take it in and go, oh, now I understand. Right. But you have to also accept that there are other people that doesn't, they don't need that kind of explanation.
This is a model.
Right.
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 2,600 years ago, before there were textbooks that this is the way the mind works.
Right.
It's unbelievable, but the implication I have for you is
Yes.
that an individual who follow Buddha loses the 7th level of consciousness.
Transforms. It transforms. So I mean, again, we only have a few minutes here, and I would love to spend more time, But in the Buddhist teaching, all those levels of consciousnesses are also wisdom, right? So all of a sudden, the 7th level becomes the non-discriminating wisdom. The 8th level becomes the mirror wisdom. So it's not as if, that's why we call it, it's a path of awakening. It's not as if the Buddha gets a new mind. The Buddha has transformed right? And now that which was a discriminating mind is a non-discriminating mind. That which was unwholesome is now wholesome, right? That which was a separate mind is now the mind that connects. So it's a transformation of mind. Okay. That comes about through purification. Yes.
In part, maybe answer my question. The storehouse consciousness, is that from this life only?
No. Again, this is Buddhist teaching, and I know there are many people in the West who find the teachings of rebirth difficult or just don't go there, which is fine. But if you're asking me for a classical Buddhist understanding, is that again, the Buddhist understanding of the body-mind is the body is something physical. It can be seen, it can be touched, it can be measured, it can be quantified. It has its it has all its processes that all can be scientifically observed, right? The mind, on the other hand, if you look into your mind, cannot be seen. It has a totally, it is immaterial. Even though its actions can be measured and seen, if you look for the mind, it cannot be seen. And yet, and we'll talk more about that, so it is immaterial. It is not a thing. It has its own qualities, right? And because when you look deeply into this mind, you see that it is not a thing, it is not material, and no beginning or end or definition or shape or anything can ever be related to it, right? Therefore, it has this quality of it is, but it isn't. Right? It is, but it isn't. It appears, but in essence, there's nothing there. Right? Now, the this is helpful, but as I said, the Yogacara was a development in Buddhist psychology in India because the upper six level of consciousness are very apparent, right? Are very apparent to us. But it didn't ask, it didn't answer the question of, well, then you go to sleep, right? You see, and when you sleep, your thinking mind is not active, right? And your five level of your sensors are not active. And yet when you wake up in the morning, you just continue on where you left off, right? What's the if the upper six consciousnesses are all acting in the present moment, seeing, hearing, smelling, tasting, and then discriminating and thinking about whatever's being presented to it, that doesn't answer what this human experience, where there seems to be this something continues over, right? I mean, what is it that links us with our childhood? I mean, logically, our childhood is over, right? Right? It's not happening now, is it? No. So what is our link to our childhood? What is our link to the past or to our past lives? If you take that, and that is the alaya, that this storehouse consciousness of all the impressions, of all the seeds, that is kind of a continuous river of experience. And that's all it is. But we ascribe this river of experience that comes and goes and arises and passes, and Robbie's just sitting there, and all of a sudden there's feelings of aloneness. It's like we ascribe them to me, as opposed to kind of this storehouse consciousness that is always just, things are coming up and things are going down. Things are coming up, things are coming down. Things are coming up because of causes and conditions, and things are coming up just because they're bubbling up. It's just like this endless process. but we ascribe it to me. Why? Because of this incorrect perception that there's a self that this is all happening to. And yet this self can never be found. And we'll begin to talk about that. But this is kind of the map. I mean, does that answer your question?
Yes, it's the seventh level, right? I mean, like, yeah, when you say the self, and I think, like, I'm hearing, I was, right?
Say that again?
Never mind, it'll all percolate.
Yeah.
The storehouse consciousness is filtered through the seventh. That's, am I understanding correctly? The seventh level is kind of like the I, me, mine, the projection.
Right. That this is all happening to me.
Makes it all about me.
Right. Everything that's coming up from the past is the storehouse. The seventh level says that's me. Right. Everything going out here, that's me. Right. Right. Or it's not that it's me, but it's all about me. Right. Right. That's why you walk into the room, and whether you're noticed or not noticed becomes an issue. Right. I mean, it's not an issue for your body. Right. Is it? Your body doesn't care whether people are looking at it or not. Does it? No. What is it? That all of a sudden goes, nobody's paying attention to me. Right? You see? See? There's a lot going on in the room, but the self only cares about what? Me. You know, what's in it for me? Right? What's in it for me in this relationship, right? It's all about me. Getting my needs met, my wants met. Right? Me. I. Mine. That's the world of self. And it makes everything about me, right? You come into a room and you compare. What are you comparing? Right? Me. You know, how am I doing? You know, we talked a lot about self-consciousness, you know. People walk into the room, they're, ooh, what are people going to think about me when I say this or don't say this? How do I look? You know, what are people, you know, what's doing that? Your body doesn't care, does it? Your body's just walking into the room. Your eyes are just looking around, right? Where's that voice that goes, I wonder what they're thinking about me. I wonder how they're perceiving me. Right? I wonder how I'm showing up. What is that? We call that the self. We call that me. But when you look into it, you see there's nothing there. It's just a construct. It's just thoughts. It's a bad habit. It's a misidentification. That's all it is. But most people, they don't want to hear that, do they? We take ourselves very seriously. Oh, there's nothing more serious than me. There's nothing more serious than getting my needs and wants met, right? Oh, yeah. That's our seriousness. We're very serious about ourselves, how we're treated, how we're not treated. Right? I mean, that's our concern. We couldn't care about anybody else. Right? I mean, maybe we care a little bit, but primarily we just care about ourselves. Right? You know, that's why we always interrupt people, because we're really interested in what? In what we have to say. I mean, that's all that's really important, isn't it? Right? I mean, you know, I've been listening to you now for about 30 seconds. All right, now it's my turn to go on for about 5 minutes, you know. But, you know, I mean, what is that? That's the self. Again, it becomes habit, you see. I mean, it becomes habit, you know. But it's all coming from, can you see it? It's like me. My opinions, that's self. Anything connected to the word I, me, mine, you know, is self. And self enters the world alone and separate because it can't see outside itself. That's why self is often called Narcissist. Narcissus. It's become the word narcissistic, right? Narcissist is in love with himself. All he wants to do all day is what? Look, see his reflection. We see our reflection in everything. Me. My thoughts, my feelings, my needs, my wants, right? Even my suffering is the most important thing. Right? That's narcissist. We are narcissists. We're just, many of us, so we were talking about our president, the wonderful thing about him is he's willing to show his overblown narcissism unfiltered, right? Most of us, have our filters in action, right? So we know inside, right? But we don't let others see that, right? Especially if we're in the Dharma. I mean, we act very spiritual. Okay, so
So I think, Randy, the first part, which is the seventh level, is the self that we've been observing, beginning to uncover, beginning to see.
well, no, we often see it at the sixth level with the I, me, my thoughts and that. No, actually, the seventh and eighth level are not seen, right? But we can. It conditions our whole kind of cognitive mental experience, and yet we don't see that that's what's conditioning it. We think that's real. Yeah, the seventh we can only infer, right? We can infer that there is because we experience. See, we experience, and it's through our language. My thoughts, my feelings, my issues, my needs, my desires. You know what I mean? My future, my past. There's a self, right, that takes credit for everything I've ever done and everything I do.
And is that the sixth level?
Well, that level where it's conscious, see, that's your conscious mind. That's where aware. This is the problem. You see, and this is why this schema is so beneficial. Because again, we can infer there's something going on. Why is it that when I go to bed at night, the day's over, I go to sleep, none of my senses are functioning, and I'm not thinking? Why, when I wake up in the morning, do I still have a sense of me that's still so strong? Right? See, it's not apparent, you see, is it? It's not apparent that I'm a separate self. But yet we feel it. And we use the language of it. I, me, mine. We get up in the morning, we think, what do I got to do today? Right away, right, first agenda. Me. What do I have to do today? How am I feeling? What do I want for breakfast? Right? Or we, remember our issues from yesterday and we mull over them, which are all about us anyhow. Right? I mean, so again, the preoccupation, even though we don't realize it, is constantly with me. And this 8 level is kind of shows us, oh, this is why. Like, there's nothing wrong with me. I'm just participating in this endless, delusive way of being in the world. That the Buddha, and then since then all the teachers and masters, all the people who've awakened, have broken out of, right? Oh, the walls have come down.
But that, so we look at the mind, we look at the self, there's no self. If we look at the store of consciousness, there's there's nothing there either, is there?
Yeah, but yet, I mean, we can't see it. We can't see the stored consciousness, but we experience it because we are always experiencing these seeds arising. It's very clear to us. I mean, when you sit in meditation, what are you experiencing? What is this endless background chatter that's going on? Where's it coming from? Because you're not, we say, well, I'm not, it's nothing I'm consciously thinking about, but yet it has its own life, right? That's all the alaya, right? Now again, just for a second. Oh, well, hold on. And then I want to have time to talk about a way out. So, but you have it.
Well, I don't want to take up time talking about a way out, but this is new to me, and it's. Did you say something about the that storehouse consciousness is held in the body? Did you say something like that?
Yeah, yeah. And that it actually is the body. I mean, we're getting off, but it is the body. It has conditioned our body. That when, see, that when our parents conceived us, according to Buddhist teaching, there was, the egg and the sperm. And the egg and the sperm carried its own genetic material from the ancestral tree and whatever, but also our alaya that was entered too. So there's the mix, you see. That's why we see that there are characteristics or whatever of our family, and yet there are things that are very uniquely us, right? And also that it is the deep consciousness of our body.
So memory of that, like memory in the body, like
Could be, yeah. That's
when you're clear, you can kind of
yeah.
have more memories of like parents and generations because it's all held in body.
Yeah, body and mind, the oneness of body and mind is something, that's a kind of radical new discovery. But that has always been the understanding of Buddhism. I mean, actually, in Buddhism, they say it is the mind that creates the body. I mean, that's real. I mean, I don't want to go into that one, especially with scientists in the room. They're just giving you a hard time. But yeah, I mean, so it's okay. Yeah, so there's a lot here, now. So this is, this is the map, which helps us see where we are and how we got here. Okay, but again, all Buddhist teaching is in the service of liberation, freedom, end of suffering. End of this delusive self and its control over us. It's, endlessly controlled. So what is the way out? Well, the way out actually is in our sixth level of consciousness. See, we do have in our discriminating mind wonderful capacities that we don't use, right? One of the capacities we have is mindfulness. I can be mindful of what's going on. Even though I think I'm seeing the tree, I'm never seeing the tree, I'm just seeing all my perceptions of the tree. By cultivating mindfulness and bare attention, I can retrain my mind to have a much purer direct encounter with all that my senses are experiencing, right? You see, that's the great gift. This is the transformation of the sixth level of consciousness, that it becomes an awakened consciousness, right? A discriminating, non-discriminating consciousness that can experience things directly through mindfulness and concentration. Oh, right? Our mind, conscious mind, can think, can discriminate, right? It can go, wholesome, unwholesome, healthy, unhealthy, right? It can see, if it wants, cause and effect. Oh, when I do this, this happens. When I do that, that happens. You see? Oh, cultivating wisdom. You see? Acting in wholesome ways. Stop doing unwholesome, unhealthy things. Oh, you see? I'm changing now my upper level of mind, but what am I also doing, remember? I'm sending down wholesome stuff into my alaya. So I am beginning to transform that. When that's transformed, it begins to send up different things than it's sent up in the past. As well as, remember, the seeds perfume each other? So more wholesome seeds, more wholesome mind states going down into the alaya also begins to affect the unwholesome seeds that are in the alaya. See, there's a whole process going on here. It's a process. It's interactive. It's not static. See, we think we're a self. We have our mind. We have something called the, you know what I mean? But it's not like that. We're just part of this process. And these teachings, right, tell us how we can now finally understand what's going on and heal and transform. Is that clear? That's all it is. So, we're given the map, we're given the tools, we're given the guide. All we got to do is what? Yeah, follow the program, walk the walk. It's like that's all we got to do. And yet, that's why then there are all these, talking about trust, confidence, diligence, vigilance, all in the paramitas and everything. Yeah, because even with that, even with a clear map and even with giving the tools and even with a guide, we still go, well, what do I do? You see, or I got to go to Home Depot today. I gotta watch this new show on Netflix tonight. I'm gonna, we got a lot going on here. Who's got, people say, who's got time for practice? I'm just so busy. I don't know, depends what you want to do with your life. In Buddhism, we say to encounter the Dharma, to have the time and the leisure to practice Dharma is rare and precious opportunity that could be taken away any moment. Why waste time on fruitless, meaningless pursuits, momentary pleasures? But we're like children, if we're honest, right? We're like children. We just want to what? Have fun. Like children. We just want to have pleasure. We want to enjoy ourselves. Again, there's not like there's anything wrong with that, but we do it. We do a disservice to this opportunity we've been given. Yes, Sally. Okay, yeah. So again, but please understand, I'm not expecting you to. Yeah.
Okay, but my question is, if one realizes great transformation
Mm-hmm.
in one's life,
Yes.
has been studious,
Mm-hmm.
disciplined,
Mm-hmm.
and has accomplished
Mm-hmm.
a certain amount of that. Okay, that affects the seeds.
Yes.
And then in reincarnation, and the egg and the sperm and the whatnot, that
The whatnot? That's a new.
the whole process,
Okay.
the whole process of creation,
Yeah, yeah.
then one begins the new
Yes.
with that transformation.
Well, with the seeds, yeah. So she's saying, so
You're not starting from scratch.
right, you're not starting from scratch according to Buddhism. You have these impressions, these within you from your past. Now, we talk about causes and conditions, right? Buddhism is, we talk about there are causes, but then there are also the conditions of life. So again, let's say Sally did wonderful things in her last lifetime, right? And comes into this next life with a lot of positive, wholesome seeds. But let's say, just for, but she's born into, argument's sake, she gets born in a family where those seeds are not cultivated, where negative seeds are cultivated. Unwholesome experiences occur. It's like saying, or let's say she's born into a family where there's a lot of wholesomeness, and those wholesome seeds within her are nurtured and cultivated. So even that's why, we talk about causes and conditions. It's not, it's like you can have a packet of seeds and they're all good seeds, right? And if they're planted in good soil and taken care of in the right way, they will grow. But if you put those seeds in bad soil, in rocky soil, and you don't water them, even though they're good seeds, they don't grow. So there's also, and that's also what occurs lifetime to lifetime. So obviously, what we would like is what? Yeah. We would love to take birth in a good family, a wholesome family that nurtures and supports, and all the good seeds are developed within us, wouldn't we? Yeah. But but that
Well,
often.
that's why you said when Buddha lived his life, it was the result of many lifetimes.
Yeah. Well, that's what I mean in Buddhist teaching. Again, you don't have to buy it. I mean, Buddhism explains enough about this lifetime if that's all you want to go. But yeah, it's the outcome. So that is why, seemingly in one lifetime, he can put it together so quickly and have such a profound transformation. That's still affecting the world. You see, yeah, because it's right. It appears, but the cause and conditions that support it are deep and profound, right? So in Buddhist teaching, it's not as if he was just an ordinary guy who had an existential crisis and meditated and took teaching for 5 or 6 years and came to this most profound awakening that the world has never seen. You know what I'm saying? No, it's a culmination of, in the same way we are a culmination of, right? Yeah.
So, before we started, Diane invited us to be free as your body, that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, the Yogacara that's associated with this bag of bones and this consciousness, how do the various, do the Yogakaras connect? How does that work?
We are already connected.
But
How do you connect that tree to the earth? It's connected. You're already connected. You see? But you don't experience. Why? Because we're lost in the bubble of self. That's all we see. See, Buddhism is very interesting. It begins with we're all Buddhas. We're all, interbeing, interconnection. That is our natural state. So it's, that's why we begin there. As opposed to, we have to get there. That's why practice is about just noticing what is, connecting with what is. It's very positive and hopeful, yeah. You're already connected. Why do I feel disconnected? That's the question. Why do I feel separate? Why do I feel alone? Why do I feel lonely? Because I identify with this self who has all this stuff that it thinks is it. It doesn't notice its connection with everything. When it goes for a walk, it doesn't connect. It goes for a walk and it's just thinking about its stuff. And even when it sees trees and flowers, it thinks about them. In terms of what? In terms of its own conditioning. It just can't let it alone. Just can't, just watch the ducks be ducks. Right? That be that be that. The sound be the sound, the pirates be the pirates. Okay. I mean, we need to come to an end, but yes, Maria.
So mindfulness and concentration increases our wisdom. And
Mindfulness and concentration does not create our wisdom. Insight creates our wisdom. But mindfulness and concentration help connect us and unify us and quiet us and connect and give us a chance to connect to what's going on in a way that's unmediated by extensive thought and projection. Right?
But it helps us in our discernment between wholesome seeds and unwholesome seeds and nurturing the wholesome seeds.
Well, I would say it's a combination. You see, mindfulness allows us to be aware of what's going on. And we're using words of seeds, right? But it's your discriminating mind that goes wholesome, unwholesome. They work together. So that is why, by itself, mindfulness, in other words, you can be a mindful executioner, right? You can be a very mindful and concentrated serial killer, right? I mean, can't you? Of course. What's lacking? Intelligence, wisdom, compassion, those are all other attributes of the mind. So mindfulness and concentration are not particular to Buddhism. They are very much part of the Buddhist path because they are used in the support of wholesome, unwholesome, and understanding. But we have to understand, as we know right now, people are, using mindfulness and concentration to increase productivity of their workforce. The military is using mindfulness and concentration to create better soldiers. Right? I mean, okay.
So mindfulness, concentration, and insight.
Yes, those are the three.
Help us to affect our storehouse consciousness.
Yes.
And that storehouse consciousness now, depending on what is growing there, the wholesome seeds or the unwholesome, whatever is maturity, so to say, helps with the expression of our genes.
Yeah, that's part of it. Yeah.
For me, that's how I see how the mind creates the body, because the expression of our genes is really what is happening in the body.
I'll if you say so. I mean, I'm not a geneticist, so, so I can't, I kind of stick to what I know. Very, this is like what I know. Okay, but I don't wander into areas that I don't know. Except that, so, I'm not, when Alex talks what Alex talks, I accept that in his world, that's his, that's his.
What he's talking about is a field called epigenetics.
Right, there you go. Right, again, which I am,
turning on and off.
right, wonderful, and I'm very happy that it helps you, in your life. All I'm saying is, I have enough just to kind of get this one under my belt, I'm just struggling over here, Alex. Epigenetics is like maybe next lifetime. Okay, so are we clear? So when we, now it's a matter of internalizing. So we have a different way of looking at our, this is all about our experience. So hopefully what I've shared with you today, the kind of Fred putting together of the of human development and Buddhist mind and the pure Yogacara has given you a sense of what's going on here. Why you show up the way you show up, why you feel the way you do, why you think the way you do, and also are willing to relook at this thing that we've identified as a self as not being a solid, permanent entity. It's just a process. A process that we can interact with and transform. It's all about transforming it in the ways we've been talking. And so again, we wander deeply into Buddhist teaching, but where do we come back? Mindfulness, concentration, deep looking. It's okay, these are the practices, right? But hopefully we have a better understanding of why we're doing them. Okay, and the stuff that's arising, why it's arising. Okay, and we stop taking it personally. There's no self. And not only do we take things personally, but we become two people, right? We're self angry at another self part of ourselves, or self wanting us to be another kind of person. You know what I mean? It's very confusing to me when people talk this way. There's only one mind, and there's no self. There are just things that appear. Thoughts, feelings, perceptions, right? And they need to just be looked into, observed, understood, and those that need to be transformed, to be transformed. Those that are good and wholesome, that you want to keep, you strengthen. Right? Okay? Just follow the recipe.